All right, hello and good afternoon. This is Andrew Wynn. Um, I'm in ISA 4220, and we're in the spring semester of 2018. Thanks for tuning in today, and today we're going to be talking about Imap and DNS. So let's get started. We're going to talk about Imap first. It's just talk about Imap first, but this is just my overview page. We're going to be talking about Imap, the technical best practices. We're going to be talking about DNS. Technical and best practices as well, and then the resources that I use to find all this information. All right, moving on. What is IMAP? So IMAP is an Internet Message Access Protocol. It's going to be a set of rules, and these set of rules will determine how messages are sent from a server to a client. Um, it helps access email on a local server, similar to POP3, but we'll get into that in a second. There's a TCP/IP connection, so this is where your three-way handshake comes in. So the message can be received on both ends. Some of the ports that IMAP uses is regular IMAP is going to be port 143, and port 993 is going to be IMAP secure. Just a couple more things about IMAP. Um, Information is always stored on the server. So unlike POP3, POP3 you have a message, you send it away, it deletes. But when when you send a message on IMAP, it's stored on the server and it won't be deleted until the client says for it to be deleted. So that's kind of a pain, kind of fills up your server. Um, so of course it's going to take up more space. Because POP3, you send it even though it's not as secure on POP3. You send it, it deletes, it's done. On IMAP, you're gonna send it, it's gonna be received, but it's still gonna be there. Another cool thing that IMAP does is mobile pull downs. So say you get an email um, on your computer, and you see it on your computer, or you want to pull it up on your phone instead. It has the access, or not the access, it has the ability to have mobile pull down so you can pull it up on your phone. Unlike if you were using a POP3 server, it would not. Alright, let's talk about some best practices. So, uh, first thing you want to do is set up port 993. This is going to be your SSL or TCP wrapped port. This is going to make all traffic encrypted and have a secure layer on it. Um, Education tactics. I think education is very important when you're in the security world. It's always great, actually, it's imperative to keep your employees informed on, regardless if you're IT, InfoSec, accounting, finance, HR, doesn't matter. It is best to always let your employees know of certain threats that are in the workplace, especially when you're opening email. And so having IMAP S is very important. So if you have um, you need to have some educational training classes on just letting employees know like what's good and what's not, what to look out for. If you have a weird email, do you open it? Do you report it? An example would be like what if you had Tracy in HR and Tracy gets an email and turns out she's being phished, and then a virus gets sent on her computer. It could potentially infect the entire server. So you need an education, you need some educational tactics to help just remind your employees what to use and what not to use, or not what not to use, what to open and what not to open when you're using your company email. All right, and SPF. So use this SPF record. It helps prevent spam coming into the server. It helps just push away kind of blacklist all spam that would be trying to get on. And then have limitations on disk usage. Maybe set up a quota for the employees saying like, hey, if you're going to be using the company email, you get this much space, because in IMAP you have every single email being stored on the server, and that just it'll fill up fast, and then the more servers you install, the more expensive it gets. And so just throw some limitations on there for your employees so they're not storing just an absurd amount of data. So yeah, let's move on to DNS. All right, what's DNS? It's a sorry, I forgot how to speak. DNS stands for Dynamic Naming System. We see this all the time. Um, this is, I mean, it's everything. That's like if we want to get on Facebook, we want to get on Amazon, we want to get on our banking, Bank of America. Um, it's supposed to be easy for the users to use. It's supposed to make it memorable because technically every website is an IP address, but it's much easier typing in Facebook.com comparative to 192.168.2.45. No one has time to remember all the numbers for an IP address, so you have DNS. Um, and then um, let's see. And then yeah, so moving on, we got two types of names. We got domain names and host names. So domain names are gonna be your like your .com, your .net, your Facebook.com, or this link right here for Sony, the Sony Alpha camera. These are names that you're gonna be seeing on your URL when you're typing stuff in. But then you also have host names. So like for my computer or for my like little server box in this class would be a15.local. Um, having uh, having domain names are important. Knowing the difference between domain names and host names are important. It just helps you know for host names it's important because it helps you know what machine you're using. And yeah, let's move on. All right, so DNS. And when you're using DNS, you're normally gonna see this on port 53. This is your main port. Um, you want to open your TCP and UDP connection. Um, that's important. It just kind of how your helps with how your port is configured and how it's layered, and helps it just be a little bit more secure. Um, DNS IP address. There's two types. You have primary and you have secondary. So primary is going to be used for all data. It's used for all of your zone data. It helps communicate with other services, other servers, um, zone transfers. So primary IP address is going to be everything. It's going to be the address if you're on your Linux box and you type in like ifconfig. That's going to be your primary address. You can just have one address, or you could have multiple addresses. So that's why you can have like a secondary, and then like a third, fourth, so on and so on and so on. But so in the primary, it's going to be downloading all the things, it's going to be seeing all the data, and sometimes it might get backed up. So it's sometimes good to have a secondary IP address, and that's just kind of like your plan B. It's uh, it's not going to be communicating with other servers, but it helps store data. It kind of uses it for data to be received from the primary database. So it's kind of like Hmm. It's kind of like a it's just like an overflow place for all of excess information to dump into in case the primary IP address becomes overloaded. For the database, there are 13 root databases in DNS, and now we're going to talk about some just best practices. Um, so having multiple servers, it's always good to have different services. So if you're in a corporation, it's always good to have multiple servers in like zones. So maybe you have a service and you have a mainframe where all of your DNS is, but maybe you have sub mainframes. So maybe you have one your accounting, your HR, your IT department, because it's always good to have like a backup server in each zone uh, in case um, in case your something was compromised, because if you have backup DNS zones, it helps prevent the attacker from getting like proper records. It helps the attacker from sending either spam or DDoS in through an email. It's just another way to help back up things. Um, instructions are huge. I should follow them more often. Um, Basic guidelines, just because DNS, when you go on the internet and you start researching from what I did, there are so many best practices. There's so many ways to install, and there's so many people have a little different opinion um, on how to do it. But um, just find the basic guidelines, install them, um, and do it correctly. And for backup servers, um, like I said, with like the IP addresses, like the primary and secondary, have a secondary server to help offload the query data. Um, Sometimes your primary server may go down, and you need something in place to have a backup. Um, in case your primary server can't be reached, you'll move to your secondary. It's just always good to have a backup for everything, just in case something goes down, because you never know. You don't want to be just a sitting duck your if your company started to get attacked or something like that, because it happens. We see it happen. We see it happening with major companies. But if you have a backup, you have an IR plan in place, then you're going to be in better hands. But yeah, so this is basically what I have for DNS and Imap. Thank you so much for tuning in once again. This is Andrew Wynn, and I'll be talking to you guys next week. Have a good one.